Tagline, because I have 52 movies.
Use one word
June.
from every single movie.
Uh, it's the no prepare band murder. There we go. It's the
Okay,
no
good.
prepared band murder. Welcome to I Be
Sounds
Suffer.
sounds good.
This is episode 212 of I Be Suffer. My name is Nathan.
And I'm Katie.
This week, I'm going to tell Katie about some movies I watched in June for Junesploitation.
Great. I am ready to not know anything that you're talking about.
Yeah, you'll know some of it. Probably maybe like 10 of them. So, if people aren't aware, Junesploitation is a thing that this website and I think podcast called F This Movie does. That's just essentially just like, hey, here's like a bunch of categories. Watch some cool shit you've probably not seen before, you know? Like, just a way to, like, people do these, like, challenges all the time on fucking Instagram and Twitter now. And I don't know if they're the first, but I know this was like the 10th year that Junesploitation has happened. So they've
Wow.
been doing it for a while. And, you know, now there's constantly people that are just like trying to cram the word Giallo into a month name and do only Giallo movies or whatever. But Junesploitation I really like because it does a mix of like genre and like actors. So like you'll have one like some categories like at least the last 2 years like Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan has been a category, so you have to watch Jackie Chan movies that day, or you know whatever. And like last year, Henry Silva was one of the actors who I'd never heard of, but once I saw him, I was like, oh, I know this guy, and it got me to watch like a bunch of his movies, and now I'm a fan of him, and it's I don't know, it's cool. I like it. They do a lot of cool categories that are broad enough that you could find like some extremely weird shit if you're willing to dig around for it. So, I watched 52 movies for Junesploitation, and like some of them are rewatches. Some like it's not all stuff I'm gonna go in like nothing I'm gonna go into super deeply, but mostly just like a way to talk about some of this stuff that more than likely is never gonna pop up on I Be Suffer, and like some stuff that I would highly recommend. I watched a lot of really good shit for the first time in June. So we'll dive into it. So the first day was space, and the first 5 days, I think, something like that, were when my phone broke. And
Oh,
so, like, a lot of the days towards like the middle and the end of the month, I was able to fit in more than one movie, but I only got the first at least 4, maybe 5 days. I was only able to get like a movie in because it was just some shit I got to watch before I went to work. So day one was space, and I tried to watch as much as possible like physical media stuff I've bought and hadn't gotten time to sit down and watch yet. And so for space, I watched Creature from 1985, which is essentially an Alien ripoff, where
okay.
I can only assume all of the money in this movie was spent making the alien, and also for blinking lights in the background for consoles and shit. Because it's pretty good, like a solid, middle of the road, like 80s kind of sci-fi horror movie, where the creature is extremely cool looking when you finally get to see it, but it's got a lot of that like shit at the beginning where it's just a crew in space on a ship just slowly realizing something's going wrong, kind of like again, very much like the movie Alien, but not as expertly handled as Ridley Scott did. So it's like a lot of characters that you sort of don't really care about just kind of going about their time on a ship until you finally get to people starting to get killed off. But I recommend it. It was directed by William Malone, who directed the House on Haunted Hill remake and Fear.com.com.
Oh, how is it not a masterpiece then?
It's totally watchable. It's just one of those movies where you're just kind of like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
I've seen Alien, so
yeah, I think that's one I've definitely heard of, but I have not seen. So
Vinegar Syndrome released it, and I blind bought it, and then accidentally also bought it from Orbit DVD. So I ended up sending Kit one of my copies.
Wow.
Didn't realize I double bought it. But yeah, I definitely recommend that one. I think it's on Tubi and like Prime and shit at the moment, so it's easily watchable.
Yeah.
So day 2 is my least favorite day of any Junesploitation, which is Westerns. Last year I tried to watch all Westerns from with non-white casts, which led me to a Wesley Snipes Western and like some Western called Gang of Roses that featured like Lil' Kim and Stacey Dash and a bunch of fucking this is a very strange cast of like black women leading a Western, which was not great, but like pretty cool to see, because I don't think that's at all common. But Stacey Dash is also garbage. But so this year I just watched one, and I watched Massacre Time from Lucio Fulci from 1966, because if I'm gonna watch a Western, it's gonna be an Italian one. And it's totally fine. Like, I don't like Westerns. They don't really work for me. But,
yeah, me neither.
like, this one was like pretty okay. Franco Nero is like the lead in it. He's really good, and like it's very like nihilistic and kind of bleak. So that worked. A lot of the Italian ones seem to be extremely bleak, which I'm here for, but also
Checks
like
out.
Close to 2 hours long on some of them, where I'm like, this is unnecessary. But that's one that, like, I don't know. As far as Westerns go, I would recommend it. It's on Tubi and Arrow's streaming site, and, like, totally worth a watch, but probably something I will never watch again. Because I know a lot of people like Westerns. It's just not my shit. I find them all very boring and just not fun. But at least Fulci is pretty good about making them kind of gory at a certain point. With like right before he starts digging into like horror stuff, he gets pretty good at adding a bit of gore into some of them that kind of livens it up a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't seen that many Westerns, but for the most part, they're pretty, like, even though they're, like, shooting and killing people, it's, like, sometimes, like, mostly not even blood in it,
Yeah.
so.
Well, it's a genre that, like, there's so many of them that are made in a period because they were cheap to make.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, like, I don't know. Out of the ones I've watched, the Italian ones are all at least interesting because they're Italian, so they make like no sense a lot of the time and are weird and dubbed crazily. But I don't know. I would recommend Massacre Time if people are into westerns. It's definitely one of the better ones I've ever watched. Day 3, Kung Fu. I rewatched The Boxer from Shantung because it was My phone was broken. I talked about this in like one of the previous episodes. It's a fucking banger. It's from 1972, and it's like this one boxer who gets kind of like pulled into, you know, corruption and like Yakuza shit, and then just has to like fight back to get out of it, I guess is the best way to explain it. But it's this one where like it's almost, actually it might be over 2 hours long. It's a fucking extremely long movie. But the entire like last like 40 minutes is one of the most insane fight scenes I've ever seen. Like, it's just one dude in a room against an entire fucking, like, I don't know, like 50 people. And at some point he gets like stabbed in the stomach with an axe, so he just has like an axe hanging out of his stomach for most of the fight. It fucking rocks.
Brilliant.
It's so good. It's a Shaw Brothers movie. Shaw Brothers, like, all, like, I can't say all, I haven't seen all of it. There's they did a lot of movies, and they've, like, I don't know, almost 800 movies in like their time, the maybe decade and a half or whatever they were kind of functioning. They were just cranking shit out, and everything I've watched though has been pretty great. So if you want to watch either extremely fucking weird horror movies or just fucking incredible kung fu movies, just check out Shaw Brothers. They rock. Day 4, 90s action. I watched Cyborg 3, The Recycler.
Oh my god.
Have not seen Cyborg 2, but I just went for 3. And it's bad.
Like Cyborg?
Yes, it's the
oh my god,
the third movie that does not have Jean-Claude Van Damme in it.
I was gonna say, does the second one even?
I do not believe so. I think he's only in the first one. I
don't know why you would.
Oh, the second one has Angelina Jolie in it for some reason.
Why?
I don't know. 3 was pretty fucking hard to watch. I don't know what it was about. It was just weird robot shit that, like, I was baffled watching the whole time, and it could be because I didn't watch 2, but also it's pretty fucking bad. Like,
I assume it's like not really super connected.
It seems like it's it follows one of the characters from 2, but maybe Angelina Jolie's character recast. I'm not really sure. I was watching it and I was like, this is baffling, but it had Malcolm McDowell in it.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And then William Catt, the greatest American hero, showed up.
Yeah, you're right. It is Angelina Jolie's character recast. How baffling. Why?
Yeah, it was weird, and it's just like, I don't know. It's one of those ones where, like, once you start getting into like the second sequel, and they're just like, we're gonna cut the budget in half, so all of the effects were fucking baffling and weird and not great. It's
William Catt's name in the movie is Decaf.
Oh yeah, it is.
Oh wow.
I don't recommend it unless you've watched 1 and 2 and for some reason need to watch 3. It is a fucking banger title though. The Recycler is a cool ass name.
The guy who is like the main character in Gremlins is in it too. Ugh, that is what a far way to far.
Oh, Zach Galligan or whatever.
Yeah, far way to fall. I think I said it the opposite. Far way to far.
It's I don't know. It's a movie. I don't think it's my least favorite thing I watched for the month. It might be up there though. It's close. It was just one of those ones where I was just kind of bored throughout most of it.
Yeah.
Alright. Day 5 was a free space. So they usually do, I think they do 4 free spaces throughout the month. Which, like, usually I use to watch, I would use to just watch whatever we're gonna do for the podcast. But this year I watched Sex and Zen from 1991, which is I think it's a Category 3 movie from Hong Kong about a dude who keeps getting made fun of for having a tiny dick, so he gets a horse dick surgically implanted. And it's so good. It's surprisingly, like, with that sort of, like, there's more to it than that, but that's like a sort of general plot description. And like, it's extremely funny. Like, it's like the cover of it makes it seem like it's gonna be like, I don't know, like an erotic drama, but it's more of a comedy. And it's pretty funny. And like there's an actor named Kent Cheng in it who's kind of like a lot of the comic relief, and he's really good in it. Amy Yip, who plays like the main actress outside, like probably the most well-known person in it, is extremely good in it. And it's this one I highly recommend. It's really good. It's just got a very fucking extremely weird plot. that like the scene when like the surgery's happening is extremely funny, because it's like it takes place in I don't remember if they say a year, but it's old-timey, so everything before the 1980s or whatever the year was that we decided everything is old-timey if it's before a specific time.
Yeah, I don't,
like everything's medieval times before 1980 or some shit to you.
I think it's like 1800 and earlier. It does not exist.
It takes place in like probably supposed to be like a feudal kind of era. And so, like, the way they do, like, the transplant is, like...
I don't comprehend what you're saying.
It has to be done, like, it's, like, this weird mysticism shit, so they're, like, it has to be done before this candle burns out, or else it won't graft properly, and shit like that. It's extremely funny. Like, they cut the dude's dick off, and then they accidentally, like, the guy doing the quote-unquote surgery's hands get hurt. And then there's, like, this big panic about, like, how if they don't get this shit done in this amount of time, that it won't graft properly and he just won't have a dick anymore. I don't know, it's very funny. This one is, like, a high recommend for me if you can find it. I blind bought it on Blu-ray. I don't think it's on YouTube. So it seems like something you would either have to buy or, like, torrent to watch, but it's very good. I recommend it. It's one of my favorite watches of the month. My first time watches. All right, day 6, slashers. This was one of the big letdowns for the month, because I picked a movie with the greatest title I've ever heard from 2003 called "Hey, Stop Stabbing Me." That Severin put out. It came with like a bundle I bought, and I was like, there's no way this movie's gonna be bad. That's such a perfect title. And it's like an early 2000s like horror comedy, but very heavy on the comedy, quote unquote, because I didn't really find any of it funny. But it's also like, it's got this reputation, like on Letterboxd it's sitting at a 3.4. And, like, I kept seeing people be like, holy shit, this movie's so good, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I can't wait to watch this. And I was very bored throughout most of it.
What year did you say it was?
2003.
Oh. Huh.
It's very much like it's shot on video, but, like, that kind of shitty digital video that, like, doesn't look good. And, like, I mean, there were parts, like, it's not unwatchable. There were parts that I, like, enjoyed, but, like, I was just disappointed in, like, this movie's title rules. The tagline is "Murder, Mayhem, Mowers." So I was like, I'm
Yeah.
in. This looks fun, and then it's just, I don't know, like the the cast. It's all like, it's not actors. It's all people that, like, this was probably their first movie or only movie. So like, they're not good. It's like, it just becomes one of those things that, like, for an hour and a half, I like, it got kind of grating, and like the comedy is very much like early 2000s comedy, but like, from what I remember at this point, not like, it's not like that homophobic or like gross sort of like American Pie type like comedy. It's just kind of
Yeah.
like not good comedy. I think I would have liked it more if they leaned heavier into like the slashery part of it as opposed to uh comedy. But yeah, that's one I don't recommend. I don't know. I think if you could watch it for free and you're like, if you're into horror comedies, people would probably enjoy it. Just, it was not for me. And then the other movie I watched was 1977's Meat Cleaver Massacre that I don't remember a single thing from. It was on Tubi and I watched it, and it was one of those ones that just like immediately left my brain for how just kind of like generic slashery it was.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't think I've seen that one either.
it was one I just like stumbled across, and I was like, I'll watch this, and it was, I guess, a movie. I don't remember. At this point, I don't remember a single thing that happened in it. And I only gave it a 1 star, so I don't like, slashers. Just don't really do anything for me anymore unless they're like, they have to be something like kind of out of the box, because there's been so many fucking like shitty or just generic like Friday the 13th, Halloween ripoffs that I need something more than just somebody in a mask killing horny teenagers to work for me anymore.
Yeah.
Um, Day 7 was Shannon Tweed, who is an actress that I believe passed away a couple years ago. That I was like sort of familiar with because she pops up in like trauma stuff sometimes, and she was kind of like big in the 90s for the kind of like made for TV like sexy thrillers you would see on like USA and like TNT at like 2 a.m. Like, she's got a lot of those, like, Cold Sweat, Night Eyes, the
Yeah.
surrogate type fucking movie titles. But then she's also in like Detroit Rock City and like the Dragnet movie and some kind of like bigger things. And uh, I knew her mostly from Cannibal Women and the Avocado Jungle of Death,
Who
which
could forget?
I've watched. I've seen it a couple times only because Elvira does like one of those sort of mystery science theater ish type things for a bunch
Yeah.
of full moon movies, and that's one of them. And then there was a Troma movie I had on DVD when I was like buying anything with a Troma logo called The Rowdy Girls that was pretty unwatchable. Um, but I watched 1983's Curtains, which uh, I didn't realize when I picked it that she is just a body double in.
Oh my god.
But this is one of those movies that pops up I'd never seen, and a scene from it pops up in almost every fucking horror documentary ever
Yeah.
made. That is somebody in like the killer, which like I won't like spoil for people who want to watch it because this is also, I believe, on like Tubi and shit for free. But there's a scene where someone's like ice skating and somebody comes like skating at them in this like really bizarre old lady mask and like starts slashing at them with this weird fucking scythe slash knife that I'd seen so many times in all these documentaries, and I was like, well, I'll give this a watch, and got like through most of the movie, and I was like, I don't think Shannon Tweed's in this, and I had to actually look it up, and I was like, oh, she's just like a body double in it.
Yeah,
um,
bummer.
but it's also this is another one that I found extremely kind of boring. But I did kind of like the general setup is like 6 actresses auditioning for a movie, and that is at this like remote mansion, so already bad news. And then just a someone starts picking them off, and the reveal is like somehow both interesting but not interesting at the same time, because it's like one of those ones that you like put together pretty early on, and then you're just like,
Yeah.
oh well, I guess I was right. But I don't know, it's fine. I think if you like 80s slashers and shit, you would probably enjoy it. It just, again, like I said, with like the slashers category, didn't totally work for me, but also not like the worst thing I've ever watched. Day 8 was Cars, which is another one that I was like not looking forward to, because I wanted to watch something. I was trying to find something along the lines of like Christine with like a killer car,
Right.
but like I've also watched all of the sort of good versions of that plot before, and I wanted something new, and then I was like, I'm going outside the box, and I watched Titan from 2021.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet either.
And for the most part, like, it's not really a car movie, but she gets impregnated by a car. Spoiler. It's incredible. It's a movie that this would have definitely been in my top 5 if I had gotten around to watching it last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's from the director of the movie Raw, which is also really fucking good.
Yeah.
And it's like, this one's real weird, because it's like 2 movies like sort of at the same time that like kind of, I don't know how to explain it without spoiling a bunch of stuff, but essentially you follow this person named Alexia who like does like car show modeling, like that sort of like just a woman in front of a fucking car,
Right.
do whatever. But also there's like at some point she starts doing this like sort of striptease on this car for all of these dudes, and goes like, after she does it, like goes to the back and is like showering and like getting ready to leave, and gets sort of like attacked by this dude who's like, I'm a big fan of yours, blah blah, I come to like all these shows. And she stabs him in the ear with like a fucking, not knitting needle, but she's got these 2 sort of like titanium needles in her hair.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I know.
And so she like kills this dude, and you realize that she's actually been killing like a bunch of people this way in the city, because you hear these like news reports of people like being murdered and they don't know why. And like she ends up going back in to take a shower, because she's like covered in blood and shit, and comes back out nude and gets in the back of this car where the seatbelts wrap around her, and she like somehow fucks a car, but it's just like in the back seat. There's no like real explanation. It just kind of happens, and you're like, what the fuck? And like ends up pregnant, and like this happens, and like there's this like, one of the scenes I'd heard about before watching it, like I listened to Queer Horror Cult talk about it, and like I don't like, it didn't like, it's one of those movies that everyone was like, don't listen to people talk about it before, you kind of need to see it. And like I agree, but also it did not take away from the movie for me at all. So I guess skip ahead like a minute if you don't want to hear this part. I'm not gonna necessarily spoil it, but there's like a thing that happens in the middle that like is fucked up. And if you've seen the movie Raw, you know like this director Julia Ducournau, I don't know, I think it's a French director. So she tries to give herself an abortion with one of the needles. And it's
Oh.
one of, like, maybe 5 things I've ever seen in a movie that, like, I actively went, like, oh, God, like, and, like, cringed. It's,
Yeah,
it's,
not for me, I think.
it's, and it only lasts, like, it's essentially, it's along the lines of, like, American History X with, like, the curb stomp scene, where it lasts so briefly, but you're, like, thinking about it for, like, so long
The
after.
rest of your life.
Yeah.
I still think
But,
about that American X
yeah.
thing.
But this, like, it's fascinating because, like, about 30 minutes into the movie, it becomes an entirely different movie where, like, the police are kind of, like, starting to, like, it happens real quickly. Like, this car scene happens. Like, she's kind of like, what the fuck's going on? Like, why is my belly getting bigger? And it's kind of, like, putting shit together. And at the same time, you're like, is she getting fucked and pregnant by this car? Like, what's happening? And then all of a sudden, it turns into this, like, she shaves all of her hair. She, like, binds her chest down and is, like, binding her, like, pregnant belly down. And takes up the role of this like, little boy that went missing, like, I don't know, however many years ago, where they would be roughly the same age, and goes to the police and is like, oh, I'm this boy, and then goes and lives with, like, the boy's dad, who like
What?
who like as like, you put together quickly that, like, doesn't he knows this isn't his son, but is, like, so kind of, like, distraught, and also, like, oh, my son's back, this is great, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And, like, that turns into sort of, like, a weird sexual thing, and it
Uh,
gets it's really fucking bizarre, but it, like, turns into this, like, sort of fascinating, like, drama with, like, sort of, like, really heavy, like, body dysmorphia overtones, and, like, it's great. There's a reason, like, everybody was raving about it in 2021, and, like, I see why. It's so good, and I highly recommend it. Like, I think it's on Hulu or some shit right now. It's one of the movies, like that and Benedetta were the 2 movies last year that I was trying to get to before we did our end of year wrap up that I just didn't make it to. And I wish I would have, because it would have easily been in my top 5, maybe top 3. It's that good. And then I followed that up with a movie
wild.
called Super Hybrid from 2010 about a weird alien squid that is in a car and killing people. And spoiler, it's trash. It's might as well be an asylum movie for how terrible it was.
Dang.
It's a movie that, like, I feel like one of us would have eventually stumbled across for I Hope You Suffer, and I'm glad I watched it first, because it's not worth watching. Although the CGI squid every time they open the hood of this car is pretty funny.
Yeah.
So day 9 was Monsters, and I watched one movie of so for my birthday, Caitlin and I went to this comic book shop in New York City that also sells, like, a bunch of Blu-rays and movies, and I bought, like, a fucking shit ton of movies, and I bought this one that I'd never heard of before that I kind of just blind bought solely for the cover, called Science Crazed, that I can't tell you anything about what this movie was about. It made no sense to me. Most of the movie had, like, no dialogue. The description on Letterboxd is: a mad scientist injects a woman with an untested growth serum. She dies but gives birth to a full-grown monster. The monster is just a dude with bandages over his body. But, like, not like a mummy, just kind of like, I don't know, somebody haphazardly put some bandages over him, and there's, like, some of them are just, like, red. There's a full scene that, I'm not kidding, lasts 15 minutes of this movie that is just two women like working out with no dialogue and just like wild synth music happening. Like, I think you could watch this on YouTube. I watched the DVD and it still looked kind of shitty. It's from 1989. It was blatantly shot on like, I could only assume shot on fucking like VHS because that's what it looks like. So watching it on YouTube has to be probably unwatchable, but it's a movie I can't say I enjoyed, but also was like, I'm glad I watched it. Like, it's I don't know, like, it was an interesting like confluence of events because I blind bought it and I knew I was going to watch it, and I think the day before I watched it for this, Brad Henderson, one of the people that works for Vinegar Syndrome that I follow on Twitter, like watched it and posted about it, and I was like, oh shit, I'm like way into I can't wait to watch this now, because his review was essentially the same thing of like, this movie's wild, I don't know what's going on. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's a movie that I would definitely I recommend, but also kind of don't, because I don't know who the audience is for it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those movies that, like, as again, sort of like the other one, where I was like, I would have probably stumbled across this at some point, but like, we're doing this on the podcast, and then I would have just been like, I don't know how the fuck we're gonna talk about this. Like, I feel like So the top review on Letterboxd is, I've seen this alternatively described as an accidental outsider art piece, a so bad it's good cavalcade of hilarious incompetence, and a merely tedious curiosity for the hardcore faithful only, which is like a pretty good description, because it makes no fucking sense, and I think it's the only movie the director made. And the one thing I'm sort of disappointed the DVD didn't have was like any sort of featurette or documentary about it, because I'm fascinated to know what this movie is about and how it came to be.
Weird.
Day 10 was sex comedies. And I watched a movie that Vinegar Syndrome put out called Stiff Competition, that is a straight up hardcore porn movie, but is Rocky but blowjob contests.
Okay.
It's fucking so. I mean, it makes sense. It's 1984, so like I get how someone came up with the idea, but it's also like it's so funny to watch this sort of like actual like porn movie, but also like a sort of legit funny comedy. But also you're just like, oh well, this is just Rocky, but like people are giving blowjobs instead of boxing. And I mean, I don't know, if you could deal with hardcore movies, I would recommend it. But then I followed that up with two movies I stumbled across. There's like some channels on YouTube I follow that like upload these kind of old, only ever released on like VHS movies, and usually it's like a mix of like horror and like comedies and like weird sci-fi shit. And I stumbled across a movie with called Hollywood Hot Tubs. And then Hollywood Hot Tubs 2 Educating Crystal, where it's just like neither of them are good. The second one is somehow more interesting than the first one, but it's just about like, the first one's about these teens who get into trouble for turning the Hollywood sign into the Hollyweed sign.
Great.
And apparently they're going to throw them in prison, but instead let them work off their time at their uncle's hot tub repair company.
Sure.
Because, you know, that's how
normal
things work for, I guess,
practical
rich white kids, but...
Yeah. Well, I mean, true.
And, like, it's, you know, it's a fucking 80s sex comedy that... It kind of is what it is. But it features a character named Crystal, played by Joel Shepherd, who has an interesting career. There's a bunch of movies I actually would have watched. Like, she's in Return of the Living Dead, but then she's also in The Artist, which is a movie I believe won a fucking Oscar. But she plays this character named Crystal in this, who has the most bonkers, like, Valley Girl accent I've ever fucking heard in my life. I don't know how she picked this. Like, she sounds like a mix of, like, someone, like, have you ever seen the movie Fargo?
I know the accent you're
Yeah,
talking
so it's
about.
like, it kind of sounds like that, but is like that, but also like a Valley Girl accent. It's
I love
wild.
it.
If I get time, I'll see if I could clip like a clip of her talking to put in the episode. But like, she's in this first movie, and then the second movie like follows her. I don't know, for some reason, going back to school, and like, while neither of them are necessarily good, the second one is more interesting because her character is like the most interesting thing in the first movie. So it's interesting that they picked her, this weird side character, to follow. But yeah, her accent choices incredible. Like, every time she talked, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, who let this happen?
Me.
But also, like, they're both like over an hour and 40 minutes, which is too long for a fucking sex comedy.
Yeah.
Day 11 was Free Space, and I watched all 4 Killer Tomatoes movies.
Amazing.
So I had obviously seen Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and Return of the Killer Tomatoes numerous times. We did both those on the podcast. But I think the last time Caitlin had come to visit me before I moved, we went to this flea market, and I found Killer Tomatoes Strike Back and Killer Tomatoes Eat France, and bought both of them, and never got around to watching them. So I was like, I want to watch these, but I'm going to watch the other 2 first. And all 4 movies are bangers. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, still my least favorite.
Wow.
Okay. I mean, it's, I don't know, like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is such a different movie from like Return of the Killer Tomatoes, and like the other 2 kind of follow the same sort of thing as Return, so I enjoyed them more. Killer Tomatoes Strike Back is just essentially like John Astin's character of Professor Gangrene has quote unquote quit doing like science stuff and become essentially Geraldo.
Okay.
And starts doing like as you know, doing this TV show, but also still doing tomato stuff, and like, you know, just hijinks ensue. It's a Killer Tomatoes movie, but it's the first one where the tomatoes get that more
like features.
Yeah, and like can kind of talk a little bit, and then they go full blown into like they could talk and are just like sentient fucking things. And Killer Tomatoes Eat France, which, you know, is a movie where the Killer Tomatoes attack France.
I love it.
I think both of them are on YouTube. I feel like at some point, I haven't
seen either of
at
those
some point
yet.
I still want to do them on the podcast just to like complete the 4 movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But highly recommend all 4 of them. I also watched Hard Rock Zombies, I think for the first time. I can't remember. From 1985, and it rules. Vinegar Syndrome put it out with something else. I think Slaughterhouse Rock maybe attached to it. And this is just like a movie about like a hard rock band that gets turned into zombies, and a bunch of shit happens. It rules. It's another movie I won't say a lot about because at some point I would like to do it on the podcast. Day 12, Prison. The first movie I watched ended up not really being a prison movie. I was trying to find...
I mean, it happens a lot, apparently.
Well, this, like, it is in as much as, like, it's... So, I watched a movie called The Virgin Commandos, or Lady Piranha, or Lunatic Frog Women. Take your pick. Not like all three of those titles make no sense, like combined. And it's about these like six women who break out of like a POW camp in like Vietnam and join like a rebel forces. Like they break out and they're like floating in the ocean and land on this island, who is also, let's just, you find out, is where a bunch of like rebels are fucking planning an attack on this camp or whatever. And like, it's fine, it wasn't great, but it's also kind of wasn't really a prison movie that I was trying to, like, I was trying to find like an actual prison movie, so I followed it up with Ernest Goes to Jail.
Great.
the best prison movie. Everybody go watch Ernest Goes to Jail. It's a perfect movie that everybody should see. Probably my second favorite Ernest movie besides Ernest Scared Stupid.
Nice.
Day 13. Some fucking weird category called Italian horror.
Ugh, boo.
So I watched 1979's Malabimba, The Malicious Whore, which was a movie I'd only sort of like briefly heard of because Sam Deegan from Twitch of the Death Nerve podcast, and then she does a lot of like audio commentaries for like Vinegar Syndrome and stuff. Did an audio commentary for it, so I'd seen it pop up a handful of times, but knew like nothing about it, and I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna watch this. And it's about this teenager who gets overtaken by a demon and just starts like sexually harassing everybody around her.
Great.
And it's it's good. It's it's hard for me to not like an Italian horror movie. But it's definitely not for everybody. But
yeah.
I followed it up with Demons 95, aka Cemetery Man, aka
right.
Delamore, which is a fucking banger. And I won't say much because we're obviously going to do a bonus episode on it at some point. And it's the one that I'm like the most interested to hear your thoughts on when we get to it, because it's so good.
I'll be the judge of that.
1994 from Michele Soavi, because of course it's a Demons movie, so why not? I have Michele Soavi in all of them. Day 14, Blaxploitation. I watched The Human Tornado, which is a Rudy Ray Moore movie that rocks, about the character Dolomite. It's I think the first sequel to Dolomite, maybe the only, I'm not totally sure. I've watched Dolomite before, and Vinegar Syndrome put out like this box set of 4 Rudy Ray Moore movies, if I remember correctly, that I'd like only watched Dolomite at that point, and I was like, well, I'm gonna watch the next one, which is The Human Tornado. That I can't really explain the plot to this movie because it's like 3 different plots happening at once, but Rudy Ray Moore is really good in it and very funny, and Ernie Hudson from Ghostbusters and shit is in it. And like, I didn't realize he had this, like, I didn't know who Ernie Hudson was outside of sort of like Ghostbusters type comedies. And he has apparently had like this career in like blaxploitation movies before, and like this one, and then I watched the second movie I watched for it was Penitentiary 2, which he's also in, playing vastly different characters. Like this one, The Human Tornado is one of those ones that's very much like the sort of, I think, what most people think of as a blaxploitation movie, where it's like real over the top and like kind of goofy but like fun, and like it's I highly recommend this one. It's on like Tubi and like Vudu for free. and just I don't know how to explain it other than like fun. Like the first like 10 to 15 minutes of the movie is Rudy Ray Moore doing stand up where he's just roasting audience members. It's pretty fun. And then like I said, I also watched Penitentiary 2. I have never seen the first one. I always heard 2 was better, and it's about this guy who like gets out of prison. I guess the first movie is basically about like boxing in a prison, and then the second one is the guy gets out of prison and then starts up his boxing career and has like matches again inside the prison. And it's pretty good. I would recommend it. It's not as fun at all as The Human Tornado. But this movie also has Ernie Hudson as the bad guy in it, and he's like legitimately pretty fucking frightening, which I was not expecting. And also Mr. T is like the boxing coach.
Great.
So I don't know. It's pretty good. I don't know. Like I haven't watched the other movies, so I have no idea what they're like as like a back to back. But
yeah.
You know, second one's pretty good if you're into either. I guess there's 3 of them, but if you like boxing movies or at all like blaxploitation stuff, it's pretty good. And then I watched the third movie, with a title that has like a slur in it, so I don't know how to talk about it. Like it has a slur, but it's also like a double meaning one because it's also a term for a spy, which is what the movie's about.
Okay.
So it's called The Spook Who Sat by the Door.
Oh, okay.
And it's about this is maybe my favorite movie I watched the entire month.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's about this black man who goes and joins the CIA to gain access to their training, and then he's telling it to all of these like Black Panther type American like revolutionary people trying to like fight back for like the rights of like black men in America. And I guess it's based on a book, which I'm really fascinated to read now, but like it's so fucking good, and I guess got like sort of banned or blacklisted after it came out because it's just like it's literally a movie teaching like black people how to fight back against like white oppressors in like the 70s.
Yeah.
But it's like he has to be like quiet about it, so like a bunch of people in like his community that don't know he's like teaching these sort of like Black Panther type groups how to like all of this like CIA training on how to like fight back against essentially the CIA and shit, like are like, well, what do you know? You're just like a fucking cop and you're fighting against us and all this shit. It's just it's so fucking good. Like the highest recommendation. You can watch it on YouTube for free. Somebody really needs to like put it out on like Blu-ray because it's great. Day 15, Bugs. So I watched Ticks from 1993, starring Seth Green and fucking Carlton from Fresh Prince.
Oh my god.
And it rules. It's so good. This one Vinegar Syndrome put out, but it's also on like Tubi and like Pluto and a bunch of shit for free. And has these massive fucking animatronic ticks in it.
I love it.
And it rules. And it also had like the Alfonso Ribeiro, Carlton from Fresh Prince, plays like a hard ass like gangster in it. But like it doesn't work because like anybody who's seen Fresh Prince, you're like, that's just fucking Carlton. Like what's going on? It's a movie that I feel like at some point we'll probably get to on the podcast because it's got like it's very I Hope You Suffer in its like goofiness, but also like it kind of has pretty great practical bug effects. And then I also watched Invasion of the Bee Girls from 1973.
Aww.
Which is A movie I bought on one of those like weird DVDs they sell at like grocery stores. It's like, here's 4 like horror movies or whatever that are in public domain, so we can just release them however we want. And it's just about like these women who get turned in something about bees. I don't know. I'm still, after I've seen it a handful of times, not totally sure what the fuck's happening, but they end up just like fucking dudes to death and like
Serves you right.
stealing like their energy or some shit. But a lot of it is like they're kind of also targeting like harassers. It's got like this pretty good like feminist bent of like, well, you know, this guy's constantly sexually harassing women. Let's go seduce him, but then just fuck him to death. And like,
why not?
I recommend it. This one's, I think I watched it on YouTube, but I've had the DVD for years. But I guess it's also now on Tubi and Prime, so you could watch like a probably somewhat decent copy of it. Day 16 was 80s action.
Oh
The
boy.
only thing I watched was a movie called Crime Zone, because I've seen the poster for so long. And it's one of those movies that you see the poster and you're like, this movie's going to be incredible. And then you watch it and I was like, oh, this is not good.
Oh, bummer.
It's a David Carradine movie, and it's just like a fucking kind of shitty cash-in of like those like post-nuclear, like everything's taken over by criminals type fucking movies from the 80s. And I watched it on YouTube, and I'm glad I watched it because I've been wanting to for a long time, but it's just not good. It's just kind of more boring than anything else, which is a bummer. And then day 17 was Fulci, which I think they do every year because it's Fulci's birthday. And so I watched the Gates of Hell trilogy, which I've covered in depth on this podcast with Lori from Queer Horror Cult. So City of the Living Dead, The Beyond, and House by the Cemetery with our boy Bob. But then I wanted to do a first time watch, so I watched 1986's The Devil's Honey, which is I bought from Severin, and it fucking rules. It's so good, and it's unlike any of the other Fulci stuff I'd ever seen. It's more of like a thriller than like a straight up horror movie about this woman who's like dating this saxophone player who I can't remember what happens, but he ends up going to the doctor and dying, and she blames the doctor on him dying and kidnaps him and just is like holding him hostage and like torturing him. But it's like this weird like sexual kind of torture to it without being.
You must have told us about this.
Yeah,
it sounds so familiar.
I think I might have talked about it on that the Girl That's Scary crossover, actually, because it's the movie that's got the thing where like the saxophone player gets her off by like blowing the saxophone on her vagina.
Yep.
It's
that is it.
It's really fucking good, and it's a real. I wish it was streaming more accessible because I don't think it's on anything, and it's not on YouTube. But if you can find it, highly, highly recommend. It's really, really good, and it's a movie that like seems to be pretty divisive amongst like Fulci fans, because it's like kind of comes towards the end of his like kind of really renowned horror period, and was like this sort of like shift in tone and stuff. And I don't know, I liked it a lot though. I'm excited to give it a rewatch sometime soon, now that I own it. Day 18 was Canon, so Canon Films, which we already covered the best Canon film, Cyborg. I was going to watch Death Wish 2 because I have it on Blu-ray, but I didn't get time, and it wasn't streaming anywhere, and like, you know, the only other movie I felt like watching was going to be Masters of the Universe, but I've seen that a billion times, so I picked a movie that I had seen the last like 20 minutes of on like cable TV years ago called The Apple from 1980.
Hmm.
That I saw the last 20 minutes and I was just like, what the fuck is this? And it's a rock opera about Adam and Eve and like the like you know, like the snake is essentially like a record industry, like the record industry. Like
Okay.
it's called like I don't know. It's this weird futuristic movie where like this record sort of executive is I guess in control of like an entire fucking city, maybe the world. And like it's not good, but it's one of those movies where you're just kind of like so fascinated by whatever the fuck is going on that you're like, this sucks, but I'm fucking in. I don't know what's going on. There's songs like every 2 fucking minutes, and they're kind of bangers like most of the time.
All right, if you say so.
Well, it's like that like ending of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, so it's like a weird mix of like fun disco but also 80s music. I don't know. I can't say I recommend it because it's not good, but also I do because it's one of the most baffling watches I've ever had. Day 19 was Free Space. I watched the DVD I bought of Attack of the Giant Teacher, and it was not good. I was so disappointed. This movie sucked.
Was she actually giant?
Yeah, for the last 3 minutes of the movie. The movie was only 70 minutes long, and 60 of it was a teacher putting on a fucking play at a school.
Right.
Intercut with, like, I don't know, space aliens doing something, and then all of a sudden there's just a giant alien and the teacher has to get big and fight it for the last, like, couple minutes. It's just real fucking boring. But I also watched a short called Donor by Lori and Aria from Queer Horror Cult. I was talking to Lori and I was like, I forget like how it came up, but I was like, is your short streaming anywhere? And it is, but I won't say anything about where it's at because I don't know how keen they are on people watching it because it's kind of attached to the Soska sisters who are not great.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like before this came out in like 2018, and it was like before they had this weird sort of alt-right pivot.
Yeah, that's a bummer though.
But the short is really fucking good. It's only like, it's like 20 minutes long, and it's this like vlogger. It opens on this vlogger. Like the entire movie is shot from like I guess like a GoPro on like the head of this vlogger who's like for like 5 minutes talking about like eating right and all this shit, and they're like going around their kitchen, and all of a sudden they turn around and there's just like a woman tied to a chair, and then it just like goes off the fucking rails from there. It's so good. And like I don't know, it's a real bummer that it's kind of like I guess the Soskas had like a hand in like releasing it, because I don't know like if Lori and Aria are just like kind of just like, well, we'll just kind of let it sit there and not
like it
really
already
promote it
it
or
exists.
not, but
it is what it is.
yeah.
But yeah,
but it's really good, and I would actually kind of love to see them do like a full length. It's very like found footagey, but like good found footagey.
Yeah. Interesting.
So day 20 was regional horror, which I tried to find something from New Jersey, and everything was just coming up was like Friday the 13th. And so I was like, no. And so I just looked up the term regional horror on Letterboxd and dug through some lists, and I watched a movie called My Brother Has Bad Dreams from 1972, which has a very like 90s shot on video feel despite being in the 70s. And I'm not really sure how I feel about it. It, like, I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. It's kind of like this weird drama more than anything about this brother who has these, like, nightmares, and, like, the sister kind of, like, trying to help him deal with it while this other, like, this fucking, like, drifter shows up, and I don't know, it's weird. Not my favorite, but also not terrible either. Day 21 was Jackie Chan, and I planned on watching the Police Story trilogy and then didn't. I don't remember why. But I ended up watching a movie called 36 Crazy Fists, which I know from the band.
Yeah.
And
I was like, I had a minute where I was like, wait, do I know that or do I just know the band?
are
they named after them?
and they have to be. So I started watching it, and Jackie Chan is in the opening credits, and then did not show up for 20 minutes. And I looked it up, and Jackie Chan is only in the opening credits doing some martial arts. So I was like, all right, turn that off.
Very, very cool.
And then I watched a movie from 1990 called The Prisoner, a.k.a. Island on Fire, that I'm very confused by, because, like, it wasn't great, but I can't tell if it wasn't great, because, like, I think I watched it on YouTube, maybe I watched it on Prime. I can't remember. But, like, the subtitles didn't really seem to line up with what was happening.
I hate that.
Like, it had that shit of, like, where, you know, like, if you watch something dubbed in English, but with, like, the actual, like, Hong Kong subtitles or whatever, and, like, they like, contradict each other. And, like, it's about Jackie Chan. Not even necessarily about Jackie Chan is even, like, the main actor in it. It's like there's, like, 3 or 4 main actors that sort of, like, the plot is someone in a prison run by a corrupt warden fakes the death of convicts to later use them as expendable assassins, which literally has nothing to do with the first hour and 20 minutes of the movie. It's like the last 10 minutes, you're like, all of a sudden they're turned into assassins, and I was like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. But he, like, goes to jail, and I don't know, it's sort of a prison movie, but, like, I don't know, it wasn't great. It was a bummer, because Jackie Chan rules, and, like, he doesn't, like, he gets, like, one very cool fight scene in it, and, like, that's it. Day 22 was Lethal Ladies, and I watched a movie Culture Shock put out that Vinegar Syndrome does, like, distribution for, called Girlfriend from Hell, which is a 1989 movie about a woman who gets possessed by the devil and just starts, trying to kill her friends. It's pretty good. It's got that, like, fun, like, effect that, like, 80s movies had, where, like, where they do, like, the laser like effect over things. You know, like, they'll do that shit where, like, it'll highlight someone's body, but it'll be, like, a blue hue kind of laser thing. It does that a lot.
Yeah.
And that was always fun to see. Like, I don't know why, that shit just takes me back to, like, my childhood, and I love it. But it's another one of those ones where I was like, yeah, it's fine. It's not the best, but it's totally fun for, like, a 80s sort of, like, horror comedy. Day 23 was Giallo. I watched Dario Argento's Dark Glasses from 2022.
Your least.
Which Caitlin and I went to see at the North America premiere, and not a fan. It's better than...
Yeah, I could have guessed that was coming.
I'm gonna be interested to rewatch it, because it's gonna be coming to Shudder at some point, I think in the fall, and, like, it's I don't know, it's better than anything Argento did, like, post opera, but, like, that's not saying much.
Right.
I don't know. I'll be interested to see. I don't know. A lot of people seem to like it, but I don't know. It's just, I think the thing that bummed me out is he came out and he was like, this is, like, Argento this is like a giallo in the Argento style, and I was like, fuck yeah, I'm in. And it just kind of turns into like a slasher movie.
And then it wasn't. Yeah.
Like, the thing about giallos for me that I always like is like the killer gets revealed at the end, and then like 2 minutes later the movie ends. And this one, the killer gets
Right.
revealed like halfway through, and I was like, well, what the fuck? Day 24, 90s comedy. I watched
Yay.
the perfect combo of Airheads and Dirty Work. Just
I haven't seen Dirty Work, but amazing.
Dirty Work has some problematic points, but it's like a problematic fave for me. I fucking love it. It's Norm Macdonald at his best. Airheads, obviously, perfect movie.
Yes.
Airheads is still one I would like to do on this podcast at some point, so...
Yeah, we've been talking about that one for a while. I think it actually is streaming
It's
on
HBO
something
Max
right now. Yeah, so.
Day 25 was Revenge, and I watched a movie called Robotrix, which is a 90s Hong Kong Category 3 movie about a mad scientist who puts his brain, or essentially his, like, it says his, like, the description says his mind, but it's, you know, basically he just gets put into a robot body and goes about kidnapping and murdering people. And so a detective puts her mind into a robot, and then they fight each other.
Amazing.
So, obviously, perfect plot. And it rules. It's got, like, pretty fun, like, kind of kung fu stuff and a lot of, like, ridiculous 90s robot effects and shit. Day 26 was Free Space. I watched Beavis and Butthead Do the Universe. Just
Great.
perfect movie. Honestly, has no right being as good as it is, however many years later since Beavis and Butthead was done. The Beavis voice, kind of as Mike Judge has gotten older, kind of sounds a little weird, but like that was kind of like the only sort of qualm, and it's not like really anything he can deal with. You know, he's just Mike Judge has to be like in his late 60s, maybe going into his 70s at this point. So,
right,
it's just like the fucking serotonin boost I needed, because it's so nostalgic and like just a perfect like sequel to Beavis and Butthead Do America. Well,
I'm glad at least something good happened.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know, the way he was able to like put those characters into modern time and the way he did it just works very well. Yeah. Day 27, Albert Pune, who we know is the director of Cyborg. I watched Brain Smasher: A Love Story, which stars Terry Hatcher and Andrew Dice Clay.
What? Okay.
And it's not good by any stretch of the imagination, but I had a blast watching it. Because Andrew Dice Clay essentially just plays himself as a fucking bouncer, and Terry Hatcher is this woman who runs across him while she's being harassed by, I forget how they call them, like, I think they're Shaolin monks. Yeah, they're Shaolin monks, and they keep calling them ninjas, and every time they do, the guy's just like, we're not ninjas, we're monks, get it right. Like, it's just really goofy, like, early 90s, like, comedy, but like an action comedy that, like, again, something you would see on, like, late night TV. Again, not good, but I definitely recommend it. If you were a fan of some of the movies we cover on this podcast, just go watch it. It's pretty fun. Day 28 was 80s
Sounds
horror.
amazing.
I rewatched The Boxer's Omen, which I've talked about already on here, which is this fucking wild Chinese horror martial arts movie. I also watched Night of the Living Babes from 1987, which was hot garbage. Like, it's even worse than like a Jim Wynorski movie. Do not recommend. Day 29 was Sword and Sorcery, which is also another category I think they do most years that I'm usually like, ugh. But I stumbled across this movie called The Devil's Sword, which is an Indonesian movie from the 80s that featured crocodile men. So,
Oh. Okay.
very much in. And I can't really explain what the plot to this was, but all of the action in it is really great. The crocodile men look extremely stupid. And it rules. I watched this on YouTube, and I highly recommend it. This is another one, probably one of the top 3 watches for me, like, without really being able to explain whatever the fuck was going on. And it's just this baffling fucking martial arts sword and sorcery movie from Indonesia. And then the last day was direct-to-video. And I watched 1987 and 1988's Death Nurse and Death Nurse 2.
Wow.
Which are fucking terrible, but fascinating. It's these 2 movies about this nurse and her doctor brother who, like, take in patients.
Doctor brother.
Well, you know.
I don't know why that makes me laugh.
They, like, take in patients and then, like, kill them, but also pretend they're alive to keep, like, bringing in, like, money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, like, they look like shit. They're shot, like, they're, you know, obviously it's, like, shit probably shot on, like, again, another thing that looks like it's shot on VHS, but, like, it's, I don't know, they're terrible, but I also kind of loved them. So, both of them are on YouTube. They're, like, both, like, 60 minutes. So if, you got, like, an hour and 20 minutes to kill, you can find worse ways than to watch these 2 just garbage fucking 80s sort of horror movies, but not really, because, like, all the actors in it are terrible. There's numerous scenes where it's just, like, you could tell they just, like, had trouble editing, because there's just, like, like, a scene will happen, and then, like, the person will just kind of be looking around for, like, a solid 20 seconds before they cut.
That's hilarious.
They're fun. Can't say they're for everybody, but I had fun watching them. And that was it. That was my Junesploitation. Watched a lot of movies.
Fun.
But about half of what I watched the year before, because I think I watched like 94 movies the year before.
Yeah, sounds about right.
I should probably text Kit to tell him when we're ready, so we can do the next episode. Yeah, I like Junesploitation. Got me to watch a bunch of shit, finally, that I'd been putting off for a while.
Give us the top 5.
Top 5. Yeah, text Kit and tell him to tell us when we're ready. It's like pull my list back up.
Okay.
Titan, probably number 1.
Yeah.
Let's see. So 1 to 5, Titan, Sex and Zen. Actually, I take that back. So The Spook Who Sat by the Door, number 1, Titan, Sex and Zen, Cemetery Man. 5 would be a toss-up between Devil's Honey and The Devil's Sword, I think. Depending on the mood, I could just drop either of those 2 into that number 5 spot. But for the most part, like, out of, I don't know, 50-something movies, maybe 4 of them I was kind of like, oh, God, why did I watch this?
That's not too bad.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Considering as we have, you know, like over 100 episodes, and I would say probably 90 of those are like bleh.
We have 212 episodes, and like I would say,
okay,
maybe
yeah.
maybe
200 and 100, 100
maybe 20 of them are movies were like this rules, or I'd say are you know movies we actively back.
Yeah.
As opposed to like this rules, but like is also garbage.
Yeah.
So yeah, next week, you would tell what movie we're doing.
Oh yeah, we're doing one of my all-time favorite movies. The Lost Boys.
Yeah. I'm gonna have some takes.
Oh, jeez.
No, I mean, well, we'll get into it. Yeah, all the stuff I normally say at the end of these episodes. Go follow us and follow our Patreon and shit. We donated.
Give us money.
Yeah, we donated our Patreon payout this month to New Jersey Abortion Access Fund because it's one of the places where people from other states are starting to bombard with requests because it's one of the states that codified all that shit into law, so they can. I think New Jersey specifically was like, we will not work with other states that try to like contact us about you coming here to get an abortion and shit. So that's good. But yeah, go join our Patreon, and we'll keep donating for the foreseeable future to abortion funds. Watch Lost Boys, and we're doing the next 3 weeks because the world is the worst. We're each gonna pick one of our favorite movies that has not been covered on like, you know, a regular or bonus episode, and Katie's was first, and we're gonna do Lost Boys. So
yeah, I figured literally we would never have an opportunity to do it, so the time is now.
yeah, it's something that probably would have come up in like a bonus episode, but
probably. But I do try and pick, like, Lost Boys is so well known, and I think the chance that someone that's listening to us that has not seen it, I think, is very low. So, like, even kind of like with Tremors, where it's like, even if I have the chance to pick it, I normally try and pick something different, but I just felt like it was time.
yeah,
It was time.
I'm still debating. I'm interested to see what Kit's gonna pick next, but I'm debating between a couple things, depending on how the end of the month looks, fucking in the world. If I want to go for something bleak that I love, or like something fun. So, enjoy 3 weeks of movies that I probably at the beginning of this podcast was like, we're never covering these.
Yo, literally. Little did you know, everything would be even worse.
Yeah. All right. I hope you suffer, but why?
But why?
Mr. Dabby! Mr. Dabby, are you like meditating again? This guy's like a rock star. I like totally eat my mother's tuna surprise. Mr. Dabby! Mr. Dabby! God.
Whoa, Crystal, you look flushed.
Toilets get flushed, Mr. Dabby. I'm busy having an ulcer in case you couldn't tell.
An ulcer, huh?
For starters, that stupid banner you put over the hot tub sign is like totally spazzing out again. I don't know what Audrey really had you doing around here. And like, I don't even want to know. But like, maybe you could just do half the things you say you're gonna do, so like this place doesn't turn into a total joke.
You're right, Chrissy. I promise I'll get right on it.
I sure hope so, because like when my mother gets back, she's gonna like totally wig out and start a whole lame routine about how like I never do anything around here and like I should act my age and assume some responsibility.
Pam's not home yet?
No. I mean, she decided to spend an all-nighter since like first time ever.